Yeah, g'day everybody. Welcome to Education on Air for this wonderful session called Data's Not So Scary. And I'd like to introduce to you Jay Atwood. Jay is a teacher and a Google certified teacher, a Google education trainer, and of course a classroom teacher, which is possibly the most important thing of all. He has a high school educational technology coordinator at the Singapore American School in Singapore. He has 20 years experience teaching in international schools around the world, primarily in Asia. Jay used to teach international baccalaureate psychology. He is deeply into psychology stuff. Whenever I talk to him, I don't know whether he's psychoanalyzing me or not. Um, and Jay presents regularly at global summits by the EdTech team. And Jay is what you would describe as a sheets geek, and he's been known to have little nerd giggles over formulas and such. So it's with great pleasure I'd like to introduce you to Jay Atwood.
Cool. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, welcome everyone, and I hope you're going to enjoy the next half hour with us. I'd like to introduce and thank my teammates here who work with me in the EdTech team here in the Asia Pacific region. We have Chris Betcher from Sydney, Australia, and Wes Warner from Queensland up in Brisbane. So they're going to be playing along with us as we kind of take you through some different things, different tips and tricks dealing with Google Sheets, and hopefully give you guys some new information and some new skills that you can take back and use in your classroom. So, like Chris said, I'm a Sheets geek. I love using Google Sheets, and I'm really jazzed by what they can do. I think if you can really master how Sheets are used in your classroom, then it really gives you a leg up. You can solve a lot of solve a lot of problems, and really look kind of like a superstar. And really, it's Google Sheets behind the scenes that's doing all the work for you. So I know at my school we are working a lot with data-driven decisions. So everything we do, we need to collect data on, and it has to have a foundation in that. And over the past few years, Google Forms has really improved, and teachers have really fallen in love with it and what it can do as far as collecting information and making it really easy to use. And that's great, but the problem is all of that information then goes into a Google Sheet. So your Google Sheet is what collects all the information. Now, most of us who come from an education background, we don't really have a Google spreadsheet background, knowing how to use them effectively. So that's where we're kind of at this little crossroads right now, where we love to use forms and how that can collect information and use it for assessment. And there's some other sessions in this EDU on Air series about that. But once you get that information into a spreadsheet, then what do you do with it? So that's kind of my goal here for the next half hour, is to go through and show you how you can analyze that data pretty quickly and how you can take advantage of some of those features right within Google Sheets. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to start here by sharing my screen and share. And actually, I'd like to take you over to the EDU Education on Air site, and if you scroll down to our session, there is a link here to access session materials. Okay? To access session materials, and when you open that up, you will get this Google Doc, and it looks like we've got a lot of anonymous animals in there right now, which is awesome. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see. What I'd like you guys to do is to play along with me. So I've created a couple short URLs, and this first one, if you click on this and you open it up, it's going to force you to make a copy of my Google Sheet. Now I'm zoomed in pretty close here. So you just hit the blue button to make a copy, and if you want to know that trick, if you look up here in the URL, let's see how much I can't really zoom that, but if you look up here in the URL, if you take any Google Sheets or Docs or not forms actually, slides, and you change at the end of it where it says /edit, if you change it to /copy and hyperlink that, it'll automatically force people to make a copy. So it's a nice, quick, and easy way to get copies out to everyone. So go ahead and make a copy for yourself so you can play along as we kind of go through this. So I'm going to jump over here back to my sheet, and we'll just orient you a little bit here to Sheets, and we're going to be kind of working our way left to right across the bottom with all of these different tabs. Now I'm zoomed in really close here so you guys can see. so we can't see all of the tabs on my screen. But if you look over to the left, there's this little stack. Some people call that the Hamburger Stack, or this little button right here. That gives you a list of all of the sheets that are worksheets that are here within our Google Sheet. So each one of these I've set up with some sample data on things that you could use as a teacher as you are doing your work. So we're going to start from left to right and give you some examples here. If you have any questions, remember back on that EDU on Air screen, there's a place for you to join the Q&A. If you have questions, we're going to kind of monitor that, and towards the end, we'll spend some time going through those. And I'm going to answer any that we can't answer on air. I'll answer those after the fact, so you can come back and take a look. All right. So let's kind of get started here. So I tried to give each of these different examples a little bit of context and an example of what you might actually be doing. So this first one, this food diary. So in this case, I've got, let's say I'm a health teacher, and my assignment for my students was to keep a record of what they were eating, and then to classify that as whether they thought it was healthy food or if it was kind of junk food. Right? And so here I've got a whole bunch. I've got a bunch of students that are listed here, and they've each submitted 4 different kind of samples of what it is that they have eaten. Now I want a quick and easy way to figure out, or to highlight the kids that are the times that they're eating junk food and the times that they're eating healthy food. So just recently, there was an update in Google Sheets to conditional formatting. So if you're playing along, if you click on the Format menu item and go all the way down here to the bottom, the second from the bottom actually, to Conditional Formatting, there's a new sidebar window over here that pops up. Okay? And this is actually, I love this user interface now. It's so much easier than it was before. So that's your Conditional Formatting panel over there on the right-hand side. Right? Now, in order to make this a little bit easier for you guys, I've hidden some tips and tricks right within the spreadsheet. You see here at the top of this healthy or junk column, there's a little kind of dog gear, a little black mark there. Those are notes in the Google Sheets. So if you haven't used those before, when you right-click, there is an Insert Note option, and you do that, and you get a little pop-up bubble that you can type anything in. So I've put tips here, so if you forget what I've got talking about, or if you get behind, you can always go in here and figure out what's going on. All right. So let's go ahead.
Oh, Jay, can I just stop there? There's a couple of questions coming through here at the moment. There's a question here. How did you make your spreadsheet only show the 3 columns?
Good question, actually. This is something that I like to do quite often. When you open up a new spreadsheet, it will come in with, I don't know, the full alphabet width of columns and 1,000 rows. Like you keep going all the way down. What I like to do is, if you use the columns to the right, I just selected them, and when you right-click and delete columns, and when I do that, well, I'll do that here. I can undo it. So it makes the rest of it gray. It helps you focus exactly on what it is that you need. I'll undo that so I don't mess up my whole sheet. Okay, good question there. That's really helpful if you're creating rubrics in your spreadsheets as well. Just delete those extra rows and columns to give people only what they really need to see. All right, cool. So let's go ahead. We're going to select column C. So select column C, just click on the header row there at the top, and we are going to add a new rule. And this panel is pretty cool because you see what happens live as you type. So in this case, it starts out, it always asks you to apply to the range, so that's the range of cells you want to apply this conditional formatting to, and it defaults if the cell is not empty. But we're going to change that, and we're going to look for cells that contain the word junk. And since that's junk, we don't want them green, we want them red. You guys see what's happening as you switch fields there, is the junk ones start to highlight already. So if I click done, now all of my ones where it says junk have been highlighted. And here's what's cool. If I change one of these healthies to junk and hit enter, it automatically turns red. If I change it to anything else other than junk, it will turn back to whatever color. So that condition is no longer met, and it drops in that particular color. Right? It's pretty easy. If you click on it again, you can open it up and you can make some changes as you go through. There are other things, like if you wanted to make them all bold, if it'll do that as well with these different formatting rules. And just click done, and it's good to go. So there we go. Now I can easily see where all these junky food eaters are as you scroll through, so it highlights it for us. So conditional formatting, that's one of the most basic ways of using it. If I wanted to, I could click on here, add another rule, and let's say we want the text to contain healthy, right, and turn those ones green. So it'll apply to both of those. If I delete that one, you see that my coloring goes away. If I put anything else in there, it's not going to color it. But if I put healthy, it will. Okay. So easy way to visualize data really quickly, color coding stuff. The other thing that we like to do sometimes is obviously make graphs and charts of data. Now this is like as if kids were submitting a form. And this next thing that I'm going to talk about may seem a little scary, and it kind of freaks people out when we talk about it, but I'm going to try to make it as easy for you as possible. And it's called a pivot table. So a pivot table is going to take this information and it's going to try to summarize it pretty quickly here for us. So if you're following along, if you click on the origin up here, this above the 1 and to the left of the A, it selects everything. Right? That selects all the data in the sheet. You could also just do Command A. It'll select everything. Same thing. Same. So then if you go up to Data and go to a pivot table, a new tab is going to be created, right? So data and then pivot table. And it creates a new data or a new sheet called pivot table. You just might say pivot table 1. And it gives us a kind of a blank chart that's starting, or a table that's starting to be built here. So when you build these, the process is that you just kind of work your way down this sidebar over here on the right. I really like this user interface as well. So I want to add the rows to the I want to add rows here for one row for each student, right? So boom, look, Autumn, Bree, Claire, Cole, Georgia, all the students' names are all listed right there, and I have 16 kids that are in my class here. Right? If I go back and look at my food diary, you know, I had 64 records here, but there are only 16 students that are listed. Right? Across the columns, let's say I want to know, I want to see quite quickly for each student how many junk food items they ate out of those 4 and how many healthy food items. So under columns, this is what's going to start to build our table. If I click columns, I'm going to put healthy or junk, and watch what happens to your table. Suddenly you've got each student's name, and then healthy, junk, and grand total. So we're starting to build this pivot table here. Scroll down a little bit more, and we're going to add values now. So if I click on Add Values, it doesn't matter which one of these you choose. So I'm just going to select Student, and it defaults to summarize by sum. You can see here. So it's trying to add things up. Well, those aren't numbers, so that's why they're all coming up with 0. In spreadsheets, we use something called Count A to count the number of times that a text value appears. So if I select Count A, watch what happens to my table. Boom. So I'm just going to do a little quick formatting. I'm going to center these just so it's a little prettier and easier to see. So I can see here, Autumn, of the 4 times that she ate, 3 of those times were healthy, 1 of those times was junk.
Hey Jay, what's the difference between count and count A?
Good question. So count will count numbers, and count A counts text. So if I tried to do this if I change it to count, it's not going to work because it'll count the number of numbers. Count A is counting text.
Thank you.
No problem. So there we go. So here at the bottom too, it's put summary. It's put a grand total. So we have 31 were healthy and 33 were junk. So our kids are eating a lot of junk food, but even more junk food than healthy food in these reports. Okay. You can play with these little checkboxes to show totals. So if I untick that, it'll get rid of that the column over on the far right, where I can show the totals again. But I know all of them ate 4 times, so it doesn't really make a difference in this example. And if I wanted to, I could apply those conditional formatting rules like I did. So now let's say I want to highlight the cells where the kids were eating more than 2 junky meals. So if I am there, I go into my conditional formatting, Now here's one thing with if you're trying to use conditional formatting on a pivot table, it really likes this report editor more than it likes conditional formatting. So if you just close that, and then I'll see my conditional formatting rules. Sometimes I have to do that twice. So I'm going to have cell is greater than or equal to, let's just say 3. And we're going to make those, oops, see how it popped back up again, report editor. If I edit that rule again, just jump back into it. You don't lose anything. That's the beauty of this. And now, quickly, I can highlight and say, all right, here are the red ones. So Savannah, Sophie, Summer, and Sydney, they are eating a lot of junk food. And we need to have a talk with those kids, I guess. All right, so pivot tables, don't be scared of them. They're actually really cool for data analysis. And what's really cool is that you can add other things. So let's say if I wanted to, you can just play with these. If I take my student, and if I drag my healthy or junk food, I'm going to drag it up into the column here, in the column section, and let go. And you can rearrange. So now here I've got it. So I've got autumn, and now healthy and junk. It's listed this way. And then if I wanted to see what specific foods were under those, let me add what did you eat. So now I can see, all right, so Bree, her healthy food was oatmeal and quinoa, and her junk food was fried chicken. So data analysis gets pretty easy this way with these pivot tables. Takes a little bit of playing, but once you get used to them, they're pretty cool. Yeah, Chris?
I didn't actually realize you could drag blocks around like that. That's very handy.
Yeah, yeah. And if you lose this, like I just closed my pivot table report builder, if you click inside the pivot table, the report editor will come back up. So it's really cool for data analysis.
I've noticed when I'm I was just going to say, I've noticed when I've tried to use pivot tables, sometimes it works really nicely and other times it doesn't. So is there got any tips for the raw data? Is there a particular format it needs to be in to work really well?
Yeah, good question. One of the things that I think is important, like in this case, like let's say I was doing a food journal and kids were filling in the form. For the healthy or junk, I might make that a multiple choice question or a drop down so that they can't misspell it, right? If you have health food versus healthy food, those are going to come up as two different types of things when you do a pivot table report. Or if somebody misspells quinoa, which is quite easy to do, it'll come up a little bit different. So anytime you can have data validation, it'll make it a lot easier.
Cool, thanks.
Cool. So, all right, let's jump over here. We're going to go to the reading journal. We're going to keep using conditional formatting in a couple different ways. So here I've got a sample with I've got my 16 kids listed, and they are keeping track of the books that they're reading and how far they've gotten in reading each of those books. So I've created a little drop down here with the percentages. So, and I'm just going to fill some of these in just so they have some numbers here. And in order to do this, if you right-click, here's our little hint, and if you hover, if you right-click on these, I'm using data validation, which is down here at the bottom. And it's from a list of items. So I've just done list of items, and it's going to give me those in a little drop-down list. And I love data validation. It works pretty well. All right. So let's just put, and you guys on yours, just put some numbers in there. It doesn't really matter what they are. We're going to play with them here in a second. So got some numbers in there. Actually, let's add a 0 in there. Let's say, oop, that kid hasn't done anything yet. So students are going in here and they're just self-reporting. Just a quick little spot check. This kid's only 25. Let's put that in. So select the whole column again. Click on D, and let's go back into our conditional formatting. And what you could do is continue to do single color, right? So I could find text contains 50, and make that yellow, and then I could add another rule for text contains 100 and make it that rule. That's a little bit harder than another way, which is kind of new. It's this color scale. So at the top here you see a single color. Over to the right is color scale, and watch this. This is pretty slick. So I've selected those, select color scale, and it gives you a default one, green. Well, I'm going to switch that. I'm going to make it from red to green. So I want my zeros to be red and my hundreds to be green. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and click Done. Let's just get this out of the way. And now, anytime a kid enters their amount, it's going to start to put those colors. It's going to automatically highlight those for them. So that's a color scale. It's figuring out what's the high and the low, and then kind of equally distributing the colors. And you set the top and the top and the low end and the midpoint color. Right? I can click on here, and it says choose the minimum value is red, the maximum value is green. You could make the maximum value purple if you want. It doesn't really matter, but it'll come with its own kind of default color scale in between those. Right? There's some other options there that you can kind of play with too. So that's a pretty cool feature. It lets you easily see, highlight those kids that are at 0, and you can have a quick talk with them. Now let's apply that at a bigger scale. Let's go over here to Gradebook, the next one. So this is, I've just put in some sample grades here, and this looks, typical gradebook. You've got your assignments across the top, but I can't really see. That's a lot of numbers, and I want to try to scroll through and find, well, where aren't kids doing so hot? Where could I help them? Where can I figure out what's going on? So let's use that same color scale here to our gradebook, and we're going to create a heat map. So select everything. Easiest way is just to click on the origin there. Go back into your format, conditional formatting, and let's use color scale again, and this time let's do it all red. And now, oops, I'm going to click done. I'm going to hide that. And now you can see I've got a heat map. So all of these scores over here that are darker red, well, that assignment 10 and these particular students didn't do so well. So something went on with that. It gives me a quick visualization of all of those different scores. You can see where kids are doing well and where they're not doing so well. Format. Conditional formatting. You can change these colors around again as well if you want. I make it really bright red. So it really kind of stands out. So that heat map looks at the value of the cells. It only works with numbers, obviously, but it does work pretty slick.
It's interesting that you can re-specify the midpoint as well, so you can actually sort of multilinear map things.
Oh yeah.
So Jay, you're saying that it only works with numbers. So for those schools that would be using an A to E scale, you would use like a VLOOKUP or HLOOKUP to convert it to a number, and then apply the heat map. Yeah,
you would. Yeah, because it is automatically. It does have to be numeric. So you either convert it to a number, or you could build it by hand using just a single color, but that gets a little bit tedious. So you could do all the, A is a particular color, the B is a particular color, and apply that to the whole range as well. But yeah, it's a little more tedious. And this only works, now the assumption here too is that everything is out of 50. When I set this up, I just made everything out of 50 points, and it works in this case. All right? Cool. All right, moving on. So that's our heat maps. So now we're going to make, this is a question that I get. Remember back at the very beginning when we looked at the food diary, we highlighted a certain cell. But then people ask, well, how do I highlight a whole row based on the value in one cell, right? So we're going to go over to our highlight rows sheet. And so this is a parent permission, and I'm just keeping track, and I want to see more easily. Let's say maybe if this was a real example, I might have the student, I might have a column for mom and dad and their phone numbers and all this stuff, and it's going to get really long. And I may have the late or received drop down far to one side, and I have to scroll back and forth. So hover over the little permission form title there, and there is a little formula right there, a custom formula, and I'd like you guys to copy that. This is one thing I learned when I started leading spreadsheet sessions, is that typing these things is pretty hard, so I try to put in these little shortcuts for people so you can just copy them. So if you highlight just this line 2, you can 1, 2, 3, triple click on it, and it'll select that whole row, so copy that. And let's select everything. Select the whole thing here. So we're going to add a new rule, and we've done ones before with these cell contains and everything. We're going to scroll all the way to the bottom of this, and this is my new favorite thing that happened not too long ago. Is now we can do conditional formatting using a custom formula. And this is where you get really nerdy, and this is where I kind of nerd giggle because I love this kind of stuff. So I'm going to take that formula. So you can put in a value like we did before, but if you put in a formula, now it's this. So let me just kind of dissect what this formula is doing. And this little $ is what's the most important. In spreadsheet geek terms, that means that it's an anchor. So it's locking everything. It's looking at B. no matter where the cursor is or what cell you're in, it's always going to be looking at column B. And actually, I need you to change one thing, I think. I think we need to change this to row 2. So B2, yep. So you guys see what I just did? I made a mistake. You shouldn't select everything. So up here in the range, you're applying it to rows 2 through 17. That's what 2 to 17 means. So it's looking in column B of whatever row, and if it equals late, it's going to change it to a color. Now we don't want green. Let's make it bright red. So now if I hit done, so if I go and then, so if you do that right, now if I go through here and I change these kids to late, it'll change the entire row based on whatever values in this particular cell. Okay? And the key thing there is that dollar sign. If that dollar sign's not there, it doesn't work.
Jay, there's a couple of questions that have just popped up.
Okay.
The first one is, are you able to make the whole row change colors for conditional formatting based on the data in one column? So I think this is based on our previous one that we were just looking at in the gradebook. Yep.
And that's this example here, this one right here. So the anchor B, whatever column you want it to look at, you put the little dollar sign in front of it, and it has the 2 there because I'm applying it from row 2. If I were applying it from a different row, it would be
I'm trying to get my head around the syntax of that. So equals something equals something.
Yep. So the equal in the front means it's a formula. So it's saying it's basically saying to do format the cells if whatever's in B2 equals late. I think if we take that out of there, yeah, see it breaks it. It doesn't work. So the equal sign indicates that it's a formula.
We have another question in the chat here from Odette. Odette asks, when you've added rules, for example, alert colors like healthy and junk, do students see this as they enter?
Yes. Yep. These apply to everybody who has view access, even if they have view access. So good question. They can't make any.
Just to clarify, though, if the students are entering the data through a form, then they won't be aware of what's happening in the sheet behind unless they have visible access to it. Yeah.
Correct. But even if they had edit access to this, when they changed it from received to late, it would change it for them as well. So conditional formats, I guess the core the core of that question is conditional formatting specific to each user, or is it specific to the sheet? And it's specific to the sheet, so it sticks there for everybody. Good question. All right, so that's changing the whole row based on the value in one cell. All right, let's go over next column. Our next sheet here, fancy tables. We're getting nerdier with each one of these sheets, if you notice, as we go through. So in Excel, there's quite a lot of formatting options. Like you can have the different templates and different row colors and different things like that. So one of the things I get asked quite often is, how do I make every other row? Like this gets hard to read, right? Because there's all this stuff. And if you scroll and you've got tons of lines or rows in your spreadsheet, it gets a little hard to read who's where. So yes, you can, and it's a nerdy way of doing it. So let's go ahead and let's try it. So we're going to use conditional formatting again. So let's select everything. So select the origin, format back to conditional formatting, and we're going to use a formula again. Now here's the nerdy. Oh, did I not put this in the? Oh, okay. You guys are gonna have to follow along with me, and I'll put these in the notes because this formula is not. I didn't actually hide this somewhere. This one is called. You're gonna put a formula in that says mod, which means find the remainder. So I'm gonna type it because I can't type and talk at the same time, and then I'll explain what this formula is doing. So you guys can type this in. So equals mod, M-O-D. And the math people out there know that that basically means the remainder. So if you take two numbers and you divide them, you divide the first one by the second one, what's the remainder? So in this case it says, look at the row number of wherever you are and divide it by 2. If that equals 0, if the remainder equals 0, then apply my custom formatting. So here's the question. Which rows, the odds or evens, will be colored when I employ this little format? It's going to be, obviously it just happened there. You see that? So my even rows, so if the row number is even, so if the row number is 2 or 4, the remainder is going to be 0. And now all of my even rows are colored green. I can change that. Let's make them yellow, right? And I hit apply. What's nice about this, because I know I've seen people do this, like they'll go through and they're like, oh my gosh, this is so tedious. They'll click each row and then they'll go to the fill bucket and they'll paint it. And then they go and they sort. So let's say, okay, I'm going to sort by assignment 1 because I want to see who did best on assignment 1. And you see how when you do that, so you guys can click the little drop-down arrow and sort by different columns. For a second, the row colors get confused and they jump around a little bit, but then they sort themselves out. All right? So making your tables look a little bit fancier using that mod formula. And I'll add that to this is the document where you guys got these links. I'll put that formula in there a little bit later, and I'll update the sheet as well. All right, last two things because we're going to run out of time here. Checkboxes. When using Google Forms, one of my pet peeves is the checkboxes type of format. So this is a simple form. It just asks one question. It was a multiple select, right? Like check the boxes of the colors you like. And then it comes in like this, and you can't really do much with that when it's all in one cell. So we're going to do a couple of different things here with this. And first off, so if you go to, if you have a form and you view the form responses, it'll turn these into fancy little graphs and kind of nice little bar graphs, but sometimes you want to do more with it than that. And I want to count the number of times that red happens or blue happens or green. So hover over the count, and we're going to triple click the count if formula, and we're going to paste it right here in the red one. And I'll explain what this formula is doing. Right? So it's looking at this range B to B, in the column B, and you see these little asterisks? Those are like little wildcards. And it's saying anytime you see the word red in there, no matter what else is in the cell, count it. So count if that condition's true. I hit enter, and I have 6. I'm going to paste that formula in here, but then I'm just going to go in. You have to manually do this. I'm going to change it to blue. Well, there's 5 of those. Paste this one in. Let's change that to green. Oops. Or green. We go over here, do the same thing. Let's change this to white. And now I can see quite easily which ones, how many times white appears. Now here's how you can data check that. If you do Command F, which is find, and I type in white, you see how every time the word white appears, it highlights it in kind of green here, using the little find feature. So I'm just data checking. Well, there's 4 columns or rows that have the word white in them. So actually this is something I just learned today about those little asterisks. So there's like little wildcards. Okay, so we're gonna do a little bit of conditional formatting here. And I'm going to go through this quickly because we're running over time. So I'm going to do some conditional formatting where, let me just get rid of this. I hover over this where it says colors. We're going to, in this column, we're going to look at G2. Format, conditional formatting, cell, contains, and I'm going to put a value or a formula in there because you could we put straight numbers in there before. We're going to do text contains a formula. Hit done. So right now in G2, I'm going to type in blue. Boom. See those change? Change that to red. Those ones highlight. So that conditional formatting is using the formula. It says whatever's in G2, take a look there, and if that's true, then color those cells a particular thing. So if you wanted to get kind of nerdy, you could make a little drop-down list here and highlight the different cells based on that drop-down list. Okay. And last thing here with this multiple select, split. I get this question a lot too. We get all of these. In Excel, there's what's it called? Text to columns, I think it's called, a function. In Google Sheets, it's called split. So it basically takes a look at whatever's in B2 and splits it on the comma. Whatever you put in those quotation marks, it'll split. So now I've got the information that was here in B, and I can put them each in their own column so I can split it out using that little split function. And last thing, Sparklines, my favorite thing as well. I'm going to triple click. These are, if you want little graphs right inside a cell, rather than going to insert and graph or chart and building something. If you just want a quick one, these are clubs at my school, and I want to have a little chart of gender balance. So this Sparkline formula, and you can look it up a little bit more later, it actually creates this, and watch us double click on the little square, boom. So now I've got orange represents males, blue represents females in this, and I've got these little visualizations here. That's a bar chart type. Over on this far side, I'm going to click that, copy that, paste it here. This is the other way of doing it. So here's my grade levels for each of those clubs, and now I've got a little kind of line graph showing me year 9, year 10, year 11, year 12, and the data as it goes across. All right. So that's a lot of information there. Hopefully there were some things in there. I don't know, guys, are there any other questions in our chat?
No, I think you've answered most of the questions, although Kathy Toff has asked what is the most comprehensive guide or tutorial in order to tinker with this later, other than your notes, of course.
You know what? I'm going to put in this document here, I'll put a link here to a YouTube playlist that I curate that has a bunch of a lot of the formulas and things that I use. But quite honestly, in the way that I've learned most of this stuff, let me just go over to another tab here, is by using the help that's built right within Google Sheets. So if you start typing equals sum, for example, all of the different ones that say sum in them will pop up, and if you click on one, there is the little help screen, and then there's learn more about sum. This will open up a help document here in a second on the right-hand side, and it gives you all kinds of examples about how to use those, right? And what I really like too is
I think you probably agree.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, I think you'd probably agree, Jay, that there are two types of formulas in a spreadsheet. The ones you use all the time, which you can remember and because you use them all the time, and the other ones that you hardly ever use and you always have to look up.
Exactly. And what's cool about this, and this is when you do use those and you're just learning a new one, the way that Google Sheets works, this formula editor, you can see I've just made one up here. It's not actually going to work because these aren't numbers, but you see how it's color coded. So my A2 here is highlighted, and down here in yellow, A2 is highlighted. That part of the formula is highlighted. So if I click, that's value 1, and it gives you the example and the kind of nerd speak at the top, and the example and kind of real speak down below. If you click on different parts of that formula, it shows you right what it's trying to do.
Excellent.
Cool. Well, hopefully, I know that's a lot.
And this will be on YouTube, won't it? Because it's a Hangout on Air?
Definitely, yeah. You can go back and review all of this and the notes. Remember, all those little tips or all those little formulas and stuff I used were all built right in the sheet as well, so you can go back and review that afterwards as well.
And one other question here was, is Google Sheets really a spreadsheet? Is it just a new name?
Yeah, it is. It is a spreadsheet. Google's product name for it is Sheets, just to differentiate it. But pretty much everything you can do in almost any other spreadsheet program, you can do here. And there's some other things that you can't do in other spreadsheet programs that you can in Google Sheets too. So very powerful.
The spreadsheet is just a generic term for this particular tool. So you've got Microsoft with Excel and Google with Sheets and Lotus with 1, 2, 3 and all the rest of it. So.
Yeah, Apple numbers, all that kind of stuff. Correct. Same. Cool. Well, that's about all we have time for. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in, and those of you that also watch this later, feel free to share this, and hopefully you learned a little bit about spreadsheets. So I'd like to thank
you, Jay.
Yeah, thanks guys for joining me, and we'll see everyone else around. Bye-bye.
Bye.